Right. Staff, you want to talk about the staff changes?
Sure, you guys, somebody gonna share the screen?
I
Ah,
am.
my
Thank you.
apologies. I was wondering the pause.
Oops. To slideshow, right?
It will be in a moment. It's the present button. The present button is in the bottom.
You want to use the clicker?
Yeah, you could use.
It was there and then it disappeared. So can you go to the staff changes page? Okay, whoop, I'm back. Okay, we wanted to recognize some changes at IBO. And those are that we have the two new staff joining who have joined us. Bobby Holloman, who is the lead data manager, and Hannah Leverance, who is a community engagement specialist. So Bobby works in the education team supporting it with data, and Hannah works with communications and is specifically focused on some of the education areas. Hannah was an intern with IBO prior to becoming an employee. We also want to recognize that we have a robust cohort of summer interns. Here they are. Many are on the screen with you, and we're really excited about this process. It both helps people learn about how IBO works. It also helps us in our work, and we look forward to all of these interns being future ambassadors about IBO and going forth into the larger world to talk about our work and how to learn more about how the city government and the budget functions. We also want to recognize the departure of two of our spring interns, Bryn Adams and Rashmi Aher. So the next slide is our org chart. And as I've been told by graphic designers, this is it. Meaning after this, we're going to have to go to buckets. But basically what this incredibly busy page shows you is our general team structure with Sarah Parker overseeing budget, economics, and housing, infrastructure, and environment, Sarita Subramanian overseeing health, human services, and public safety and education, Indira overseeing administration, Tina Garter overseeing communications, and Jackie Sherman as the General Counsel and Chief Innovation Officer, overseeing both IT and some of the public safety research. So we are proud to have reached the size that we believe the charter suggests, and that we are staffed to about 10% of OMB. And, but for the general movement of staff, we think we've reached the right size. And so now I hand it back to, I think I hand it to Tina, right?
Yep. Hi, everyone. I'm Tina Guarda, and I lead IBO's communications and outreach team. I'm going to be going over the goals of my team, our accomplishments, and focusing on the new website, which is very exciting, as well as our growing social media presence targeting a younger demographic. So the overall goal of the communications and outreach team, to no surprise, is to enhance engagement with our publications and our agency. And I think of this as a two-lane road. On one side, it's about getting our research into more hands with people who actively follow our work and those who don't yet realize it's relevant to them. And on the other, it's about creating clear and easy ways for New Yorkers to come to us. with questions, research requests, or invitations to share our work with their communities. And the challenge is currently different audiences consume information in different ways across different platforms and provide feedback differently as well. So we're spreading the word about IBO using a variety of strategies. Hi. Malik has led our press and council member engagement with great success. We're seeing more questions during testimony and more council members are proactively reaching out to us. Sinray has been leading our grassroots civic engagement, which has been focused on community boards. And she's spearheading our multimedia content, which we're going to see examples of later on. This has also been helped by Lizzie, our archivist, who's not only ensuring we preserve IBO's work for the future, but is also providing invaluable help in creating engaging social media content. She's really good at it. Hannah, who just started full-time, created a high school module as an intern, teaching students about how the IBO budget works. And she's workshopped this module at several high schools already and continues to do so. She was doing that with the help of IBO staff. She's also, as Louisa said, focused on education grassroots outreach. And Sinray and Hannah are also shaping our presentations there with input from the community. So they're already leveraging the connections they've made to make sure that we're providing a service that people need. And throughout all of this, Tara, who's online, has been spearheading the use of new standardized templates that give IBO a new modern look for reports, both big and small. And then there's our website, which is new online. You should go there. You should visit it. You should explore it. You should give us any feedback, both positive and negative. This was designed by a team of us at IBO as the primary gateway for that two-lane road I was talking about. The new website includes a more intuitive search, so users can find what publication they want quickly with an intuitive set of topic areas. There's 12 of them, and each of them have a corresponding visual icon to help people find what they need. We also have multiple buttons and a dedicated page for website users to be able to ask us questions and invite us to events or to present. And we've already had a couple of questions come in this way. The website's only a couple of months old, but it's already had about 3,500 new users. And we'll be using these metrics. We have access to these metrics via OTI, and we can continue iterating the website's content to ensure it encourages user engagement. And we'll be focusing on public engagement on Ask IBO specifically, and on budget basics too over the summer. And tying into this to make sure people know about these features and can also comment is our social media. Our social media is in a growth phase, which means we get to experiment with what kinds of content work, what content works best to draw New Yorkers to us. And we haven't found a single type of content that consistently works. Instead, it's actually the variety itself that's proving effective. So what kind of variety am I talking about? And again, you're going to see that with each of the topic areas we're going to be going through today. We use infographics, which you'll see an example of with the True Cost of Economic Security report that Steph spearheaded. We also use a variety of videos, and sometimes it's a comms team member explaining a topic, or it can be an analyst themselves explaining a topic, which we'll see with Gianpaolo today with its report on actuarial smoothing. We've also used a visual style that's a combination of visuals, infographics, and voiceover to bring you takeaways, as you're going to see with Eric and Elena's research on lifting the cap on food vendor permits, on food vendor permits. And sometimes we're also using interviews. So a comms team member will interview an analyst to bring out the salient points of their research. And that's worked well with the education team. The goal is to spoon feed our key takeaways with a dose of humor and fun, as you'll see, to make IBO feel alive and present as a social media, to the social media audience. And the goal is to also inform and educate. And to that end, we've gotten anecdotal praise of people unsponsored coming to us, telling us that they love our socials. And that's come from New York Community Trust and the Daycare Council. We've also seen people reposting our post, which is an important metric for success. And that's been done by council members and the city council's official account. Their official account actually retweeted our posts about the Budget 101 presentations that Sinray has been giving. And we've seen our videos cross this 3-second mark for capturing people's attention. And I think we're getting a small, yet I think mighty and well-informed growth of followers. And we're going to continue to experiment with the social media content and begin to tailor content for the platforms that we're prioritizing. And those are Twitter, Blue Sky, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And on top of that, we're also going to be looking into our growth opportunity on YouTube specifically. Our shorts are already doing well there, but we want to develop long form videos and podcasts to provide New Yorkers with a deep dive into our work and specifically, hopefully, our methodology, which I think helps provide a transparency into how we get to our takeaways. And yeah, with that, I will stop and see if there's any questions.
The webpage is big improvement.
Sorry?
The webpage, big improvement.
Yes, I'm glad you think so. Yeah, and there's also more, we're gonna be rethinking some of our budget guides, which are currently also available on our website.
Some of us have to extend our social media platforms.
You should follow us, NYCIBO.
I just wanted to add that all of this has been an enormous amount of work, and I really laud the team. It's also totally possible because of our movement into the OTI environment, meaning that being within OTI has allowed our technology to upgrade and thus to be able to support this website.
Excellent. Any other questions? All right, well done, really done, really helpful. So next,
I think we're gonna move into
Yeah.
some discussion of the recent IBO work product.
Right. So I started.
Right.
And then I handed, no, who
Oh.
started? Just tell me who's doing this page.
Well, I can do it. And since the beginning of 2025, we've released 44 pieces of work product. And just to add to what I was talking about before, now with each report, we sometimes consider doing one-pagers. And those have been particularly successful when doing them for testimony. And sometimes our reports are relevant to a particular testimony. So Malik's been spearheading the us creating sort of a short form, one page, what are salient, like the biggest takeaways from the report to get people to ask more questions. So that's been part of the increase in work product that we're doing. And this compares to, so this quarter, we've released 18 pieces of work product, and that, in the previous quarters, we've done 12 and 11. So increasing our output, which has been great. And yeah, here you see that our reports include interactives, explainers, press kits, which include just further context giving and testimonies. And we've updated our interactive fiscal history tables, which is great because I know we use those a lot to answer press questions. So yeah.
So these are all the reports
I'm out. Yep.
since the last board meeting, or all of the work product, because some of it is also testimony and letters. Great.
impressive.
Okay, so we're gonna start with our presentations, and we're gonna start with the response to the executive budget and our testimony. We thought it would be helpful to remind people of the many events that have taken place between April 1st, when the state budget was due, to the release of IBO's report, which is that second yellow dot, which was May 20th, our new charter mandated date. So just starting back in April, obviously the state budget was due, was delayed. On May 1st, the administration released the city's executive budget. We wanted to recognize that this was during a time when there was a lot of turmoil from both the federal level as well as uncertainty from the state level. So that's really what this timeline highlights. So of course, the executive budget did not reflect, the state budget. And so there were placeholder amounts for, both state and federal aid. And then the state enacted budget happened on May 8th. And IBO was able to acknowledge some of the state actions in our report, including changes to foundation aid. So we pointed out what was included in the executive budget by the city, but also there was additional funds dedicated for childcare vouchers in the state enacted budget, which IBO incorporated into our analysis. The next day after the state enacted budget, the House of Representatives released a budget bill. And we did have conversations with the state budget team, which, they did acknowledge the fact that obviously a lot of the assumptions that were in the state budget will probably need to be revisited. There is no, so we're anticipating the possibility of an extra session at some point. On May 12th, the House of Representatives released the tax package, and we included analysis of sort of what aspects of that we see as potential impact to New York City residents. And then May 14th, the House Energy and Commerce Committee advanced the healthcare section, slashing Medicaid. So obviously, that was something that we also talked about in our mandated report. There was a Moody's downgrade of US credit. And then the day after our report was the One Big Beautiful Bill passed in the House. And so we're continuing to follow negotiations in the Senate and how all of that shakes out. But we do want to just point out, to keep in mind that out of the almost $120 billion budget this year for the city, 10 billion is federal dollars, so almost 9%, almost 10%. And 21 billion is state dollars. And we note that those state dollars are predicated on additional federal money. So there could be sort of this compounding effect with the federal reductions. So 35% of the state budget, the largest chunk of which is Medicaid, is something that we're tracking very closely. And I mentioned Medicaid, but some other federal cuts that we're tracking really closely are the health, basically, conversations around what will happen to New York State's essential plan. And there have been a lot of Fiscal Policy Institute has talked about the impact to the loss of health insurance for a lot of New Yorkers, reductions to SNAP. And we're also looking at other institutions that rely really heavily on federal aid, and that includes Health and Hospitals and NYCHA. And these are two areas that we're currently working on, and reports to, we're thinking about and how to explain the finances of those institutions, and seeing if we can put everything in one place. To sort of detail, the sources of their funds, what funds come directly to them versus through the city, and that sort of thing. And in our testimony, we really focused on the time for adding reserves is now. And we identified sort of three, main reasons for why this is important right now. So as I talked about the scale of federal funding cuts, combined with the decisions to slash academic funding, so areas that don't necessarily directly impact the budget, but will impact New York City and its residents, are really important to keep in mind. The severe limitations on immigration, huge tariff impositions, and how that's going to impact inflation. So that being the first really main impetus. Second, the state's policy choices pass fiscal pressure to the city. I mentioned childcare vouchers is one area. The city had asked for 1 billion and got about a third of that amount from the state in matching funds. And so that's an area that we're tracking and seeing, the adding to reserves will help New York City manage the unexpected funds that aren't coming from the state. And then the third area are, these are things that we've been talking about pretty consistently, which are the risks in budgeting practices, so under budgeting in key areas like housing vouchers. And I think in particular for this executive budget, childcare vouchers is the biggest area of under budgeting that IBO has identified. Over budgeting in some areas, we talk about, there was savings recognized for asylum seekers, but we believe there could be additional savings in those areas, as well as personnel costs. And then continued dependence on prepayment to offset next year's expenditures. So we talk about this trade-off in the report of, finding a balance between prepaying next year's expenditures and putting money in reserves. And also very important are the delays in payments to nonprofit providers. This was something that Louisa testified yesterday to the Charter Revision Commission, and one that she has testified multiple times on. And that's another area. I'm going to pass it on to Sarah to talk through the
But
specifics.
I just want to add one point, and that is while we strongly believe the time to add to reserves is now, we are not implying that in that addition that will be able to offset the scale of potential cuts, but rather by increasing the reserves, it would be lessening or smoothing the impact given how sudden and dramatic the cuts should be. And so we've been really clear that we don't believe that reserves could compensate for the amount of monies that appear to be eliminated from the budget.
All right, for our gap estimates, IBO does an economic forecast, and we use that, the local economic forecast as the basis for a revenue forecast. And that's something our economics team prepares, looking at all of the major taxes. And then our budget and policy analysts look at different city agency budgets and identify places they think OMB's presentation of the numbers are either over or underestimated. And we put those two pieces together to form IBO's gap numbers. In this budget, our local economic forecast is predicated on a scenario where job growth and business growth are stagnant. Essentially the economy stalls and flatlines, but we did not forecast any recession scenario. It's too soon to say that, and certainly as things evolve, our economics team will think about what next steps might be as the year progresses. But from where we see now, we had growth in the past year. It was slow, but it was certainly, the economy was growing. Since the start of this year, and certainly in Q1, we saw things slowing down. And so that's the direction we took our forecast, and we're feeling like it is pretty sure that this slow that we saw in Q1 will continue, if not sort of become more prominent as the year progresses. So what does this mean? In the current year, 2025, OMB they have a prepayment, so they have a surplus that they're using to offset next year's expenses. That is in 2025, on top of the fact that they added $2.3 billion in new spending in month 10 of this fiscal year. So a notable growth in spending for the current fiscal year in this executive budget. IBO estimates that there is a larger surplus than that by 1.6 billion in additional funds. This is partly due to lower estimates IBO has for asylum seekers. There are still some very high cost estimates that OMB is baking into their expense budget that IBO has reason to think will come in lower. And also the city is still carrying a certain amount of vacant positions that it hasn't filled. And as the year is concluding, it seems quite evident that those dollars that are sitting in the budget will not be spent. So that's largely two drivers of where this additional surplus comes from in the current year. Starting next year, we are anticipating larger gaps than what OMB is presenting. And across the out years of this budget, the gaps range in about 7% of the city's tax revenue as a metric, and that's slightly larger than the 5 to 6% that the city traditionally has has had in its out year gaps and has closed. So that's one thing we wanted to highlight.
Thank you for that. Any questions? Just back on the federal, and Louisa and I had this conversation, you're focusing on NYCHA, H&H is really important in this world. That bill is going to change. There may be other areas though, where we, board members or others would suggest it may be worth looking at. I do think the notion of focusing on particular areas makes sense. Everybody else talking about the more broad.
Yeah, definitely. And
ramifications of-
something, one thing I didn't mention was, our preliminary report looked at by agency, the share of federal and state funds that they have. So
Oh,
one,
yeah, that's right.
so HPD is one in particular that we
Absolutely.
are
That's
looking
right.
really closely at.
Largely federally funded.
Yeah.
We get a lot of federal dollars for transportation capital projects. So that's something we're also paying close attention to.
Right, but there may be even other areas that are affecting our residents. I mean,
Right.
in easily, I'm sure you're not surprised I'm gonna raise the cuts to Pell are going to be
Yeah.
a big deal
Yeah.
to a big portion of our population.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Anybody else?
Also tied to that is how the state chooses to respond
Oh,
to federal
absolutely.
cuts.
That's a
And so
big question.
that's the additional layer that has yet to be seen is where the state chooses to shuffle around its money when cuts hit their budget.
Jackie, you can skip anybody.
I can ask Tara too.
I just want to, if anyone's on the screen and we're not recognizing you, please just jump in. Carol, Mark, I'll just ask, any thoughts here? You want to jump in before we move on?
Depressing,
Thank you.
but no, I don't.
Right, thank you.
So hopefully the audio works on this for everybody on Zoom, but
We're gonna go.
Yeah, so this is the video that we created with Gianpaolo on his report on actuarial smoothing.
Cinema debut.
Yeah.
Oh.
The video's out. Go ask Andrew. Let me see if. Hey, Andrew. Yeah, what's the audio on the video that you're trying to show?
Otherwise you have to recreate it.
Yeah, I don't have the transcript with me.
Or the mug.
And holding.
Little,
Yeah.
sorry. Let's try here first.
Yeah, that's
Did maybe press the volume on your computer. Should work.
You get it.
Oh, I see. So it's not, it has to come from that.
Well, can I just say something real quick?
Yeah, sure.
Is there another mic?
Apologies.
Is there a room mic that we could mute? That might.
Maybe that would be there, yeah. Yeah, because I see that.
Towards 3 of its 5 pension funds. As you can see,
Thank
this is a
you.
graph of the scheduled
Nice.
Okay.
Or Gina.
Hey, my name is John Paulo Di Felice, and I'm IBO's pension analyst. Today I'm going to be talking about some proposed legislation that the governor brought forward in February of this year to alter the city's pension systems. So the governor's proposals came in multiple parts, but the main proposal has to do with the city's payments towards 3 of its 5 pension funds. As you can see here, this is a graph of scheduled contributions that the city will be making to these 3 pension funds. In 2032, we will be going from paying around $5 billion to receiving a check in 2033 of about $1 billion. This delta is called the contribution cliff, and the massive influx in funds that an incoming mayoral administration would be receiving invites questions as to whether or not we as a city should be preparing now or if we should do nothing. To be more specific, the proposed legislation would have seen our contribution schedule change from this to this.
Straight line.
As you can see, this is a rather simple, straight decrement. So, what would be the trade-offs of embracing a plan like this? Just like when you refinance a mortgage, by extending the period of payments, like we would for our pension systems, you can guarantee lower annual contributions and a steadier, more consistent rate of decline, preventing an abrupt contribution cliff that we see in 2032, 2033. On top of the existence of the contribution cliff, there are investment and actuarial risks that must be considered. Whether lawmakers follow the proposed legislation or they adopt a different payment plan, the contribution cliff is an issue with our pensions that will be addressed. For more information, check out our report on actuarial smoothing.
A whole new career.
So yeah, any questions?
Yes. But, I mean, Mark, you did this, so.
Oh wait, I don't think they can hear us.
Oh yeah, we're muted.
Oh.
No, we can hear you now.
Yeah. Okay.
So basically, as Tina highlighted in her explanation of our communication strategy, part of the idea of reaching a broader demographic is taking reports that might not seem accessible and having mostly the primary author, maybe other folks, do social media posts to explain it. And so this is the first example. And as you could tell, we all delight in Gianpaolo's red line because it's real-time analysis. But the reality is it's trying to explain a really complicated concept to folks who might not want to read the report initially, or then might be intrigued and go read the report. So it's an attempt to broaden who we reach and how we reach them.
And just to clarify, I agree, great job. This did not happen.
No, it did not.
Not yet.
And there is controversy about this. And there was another part of the bill that dealt with not the actuarial smoothing, but I believe there was smoothing, the actuary asked for a shorter period.
It came in 3 parts. So the first component of the bill that I was discussing was payments towards the accrued liability, which is essentially the system's debt. There were also changes that would have allowed, so how investment gains or losses are factored into the system is twofold. They have an actuarial track basket of goods, and then there's the market value of those goods. The proposal would have eliminated the necessity for the market value analysis, which would have simplified the approach. And there also was going to be a provision that would have automatically seen a fund change their repayment of the pension debt to a ramped declining payment akin to the red line I drew there. And it would have been an automatic kick-in essentially. There was also legislation passed regarding the extension of pension benefits for specific uniformed officers as well.
Right.
But yeah, that actually did pass.
That did.
Yeah.
What is the position of the 3 funds, boards about this? Did they endorse the bill?
By position, do you mean their like relative funded ratio or like?
No, I mean
They like it.
their point of view. Did they endorse this law, this stuff, or were they opposed?
I'm unaware as to the opinions of the boards.
I don't know if the board took a position. Louisa, do you know?
No, but the
union-
actuary supported it, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
But the unions ended up not supporting it. as
Well,
far as
that's what I was really asking. Did they oppose it, or did they just say we're not getting involved in this?
I don't know if they took official position.
But
I
they weren't in-
believe they were not excited about it.
Right, which is why it didn't go anywhere. But I don't, but why? I mean, why would anyone be opposed to this?
Well, I mean, there are a lot of trade-offs when it comes to this. Primarily, there are three. There's a budgetary one, which is that trade-off that I was talking about in the video between the lower payments now, but extending the payments longer term.
Right, I mean, there's a present value
Yeah,
cost here.
Exactly.
Right, no, but
Yes.
Carol, there's I think, significant present value cost to this. I
Discussed it
don't,
in the report.
right, I knew I read some of that.
I have to read the report. Okay,
Yeah, I think it is, because just looking at the line, you would think, why would you?
Yeah.
So
exactly.
there's a difference between the pension systems themselves having no cost and no cost to the city. So by statute, payments towards the pensions UAL have to have the same present value indexed to today's dollars. So technically to the system itself, there are no gains or losses from this, but to the city, there would be an incurred cost of extending the payments, because by the trade-off intuitively is in 2033, we would just stop paying entirely, and then we would forego. Well, there's a whole conversation of risks that we can talk about, but that's in the paper.
Okay,
I would add, though, even for the systems, the sooner they are fully funded, there's more security.
Yeah.
There's always risk to not having a fully funded system.
100%. There are also other risks that are discussed in the paper that have to do with the timeliness of when a payment should be occurring or what have you.
And some intergenerational discussions.
yes.
Yeah. The paper is very well done.
And the paper does have the breakdown by pension system.
Yes.
So that's
Okay.
a helpful chart.
Yes, this does only affect 3 years.
In the meantime, as you pointed out, though, Albany did add an additional cost to the pension system and policing.
Yes.
Yes.
Which are the two not included in this discussion.
Right.
Right.
And just to plug the plan on our communications end, it is always a real challenge that the kinds of videos that do well and that people are watching are short. So it's hard to include really everything that you want to include, which is why we're going to be moving into a longer form video where we could go into the other discussions here. Because while we're trying to use the videos to get people to the reports, it's hard to get people to read things these days. But YouTube is a huge, most people don't really watch TV anymore. People are watching YouTube to learn about
But a
whatever
short
it is.
video, actuarial assumptions
Yeah.
is quite the compliment.
They did a great job. The actuary's office is jealous. The next would be the true cost of economic security report. Do we want,
I think we're gonna just keep moving. I don't.
do we want to go to?
Or you want to go to the?
No, I would just do it. Just go ahead, because the challenge is that Jennifer, if she can, is going to bring her board in for this, but she's also in a board meeting and also in another discussion. So I would just go ahead.
Why don't we do lift street vendors first in case, yeah, and then the girls.
And if she comes in, we can break from whatever.
Yeah.
Come back.
So if you go to slide 24, that'll be the video, and then, oh, no, I'm sorry, Eric's gonna introduce the research first, and then we're going to.
Yeah, just a couple quick remarks for context. Hi, I'm Eric Mosher, I'm on the economics team. Elena Turnquist and I worked on this report. She's on the HEI team. The original impetus for this report was a request from several council members to study what would be the fiscal impact of eliminating the cap on street vendor licenses and permits. This research was originally conducted over the course of 2023 and it was published in January 2024. Last month in May, IBO, in the form of Elena and I, testified about the report findings to the City Council Committee on Consumer and Worker Protection. That committee is currently considering several vending-related bills that have been introduced since this report was originally published, again, last January. Just to be clear, I want to make clear that this report does not analyze any of those bills in particular, nor is it a fiscal impact statement about any one or combination of bills. It's really looking at more, what would be the fiscal impact of a scenario in which caps were eliminated, but doesn't go into the details of any of these bills. So, and then we'll be happy to answer any questions after this video.
In New York City, vendors must get a permit or license to sell food and merchandise on city streets. The permit cap is currently around 7,000, which is dwarfed by the 20,000 people waiting to receive one. So what if the city gave a license or permit to every vendor that wanted one? IBO found that it could generate millions per year in new revenue and could offset the costs to expand permit access. If all 20,000 vendors came off the wait list, IBO estimates new revenue could reach up to $59 million per year. The new revenue would depend on how many vendors apply for permits. For an $116 billion budget, lifting the cap wouldn't fundamentally change the city's budget, but expanding access to permits could benefit individual vendors and how they operate. To hear more, watch IBO testify before the City Council on May 6th at the Committee on Consumer and Worker Protection.
Good intro.
Just a quick, would you remind us about, there's also a cost or fine.
In New York City, vendors must get
a small part of this too is that for vendors who operate without permits, is there any enforcement or fine? So there's also potential for a cost elimination as well, right?
Are you talking about getting rid of like forgiveness of fines?
Enforcement.
Well, yeah, what is the extent of it that we would, so in addition to additional revenue, there would also be the cost of, the others.
Yeah, so our fiscal impact looked both, we looked at what people who are currently permitted are paying in fines. And expanded that to include people that would, because right now, if you are not permitted, you can still also be fined, but obviously for some of those, the fine collection is not as high of a rate of fine collection. So we kind of extended that rate for permitted to what newly permitted people would be paying. We also did estimate, and that's not included in the 59 million number that we have, but we did a calculation on folks that, based on the data that we see now, if we were to pursue fine forgiveness for certain vending related infractions, because you have to pay all of your fines in order to become permitted. So for some folks, that can be a cost barrier to entering the legal formal vending market because they now owe, thousands of dollars to the city. And so we did we have that number here somewhere, but we also looked at, kind of an optional cost to the city that could be pursued if they wanted to forgive outstanding fines that have gone uncollected so far. Yeah.
Would there, you're talking about thousands of more vendor trucks. I mean, there are quality of life and other management issues related to this that does the permitting include allocation to specific locations so that we would be able to make sure that they're not all lined up together on, one street, which won't stop them from making money. So is that included when you grant a permit, that you can just go wherever you want, or is it for a specific location? I don't know.
You can go wherever you want if it's a place you can legally vend as a street vendor.
And there are currently permits that are designated for boroughs outside of Manhattan and also permits that are designated for within. So right now that permitting system is more focused on borough-based allocations. But and then there's a lot of rules about, how much sidewalk space is needed. So there is definitely a limit. Even we do talk about that in the paper, that there is the permit limit and the license limit right now, but even without the permit or license limit, there are regulatory limits just related to the physical space. There aren't unlimited 15 feet sidewalks
Wow.
in New York City. So there's a lot of areas of the city that even with a permit or license cap being lifted, would still not be available as sites for vending.
One of the main assumptions that we made in this analysis is that basically, if as a response only to the policy of removing the cap on licenses and permits, the primary response would be to bring some number of people who are currently vending without a license into the license system. Based on academic research that we reviewed that looked at sort of the causes and determinants of street vending, it seems that the main reasons that people decide to do this work is, lack of access to more formal opportunities, poverty, cultural reasons, things like that, much less so than whether or not they can get a license. So basically, assumption number one is that only removing the cap wouldn't by itself lead to an explosion of street vending. And then on top of that, the things Elena just talked about in terms of the other regulatory limitations. One other big one is that to be a food vendor, licensed food vendor, you have to store your material in a city managed commissary space, which adds, another limit on this. I mean, those are very limited in terms of space. So yeah, basically, our assumption is that just removing the cap wouldn't alone necessarily lead to a huge increase in that street.
And out of their testimony, just to highlight, we've gotten engagement from council members, and we've also gotten engagement with different business and community groups that have an interest in the topic.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
And we do know
Looking
that
for
this
to
is.
try to challenge some of our assumptions, which we welcome, of course.
What I'm saying, you're going to have an uproar in community boards.
Yes.
So,
We did translate this report into Spanish. It was the first IBO report that we did that, and that's something that we are looking to do for future reports.
Yeah, we have two upcoming in both in the education space, in Spanish and Mandarin. Because the other thing I didn't mention is Sinri and Hannah both speak Chinese, so we're going to be trying to do more presentations for those communities as well, which is exciting. So
Thank you.
Return to. Okay, great. Hi, I'm Steph. I work on the education team. So recently we put out a report on this new measure called the true cost of economic security. And it's mainly examining differences between poverty as like in the deprivation sense versus a measure of what it means to thrive in terms of your resources to cover more than just the cost of food and shelter, but the other costs that are necessary in order to function in the local economy. So school districts have been measuring poverty since the 60s to allocate funding for school, actually since the 40s, but since the 60s, they've been using the federal poverty line to measure poverty. And the purpose was to allocate funding for school meals, Title I funds, which provide additional money to schools to support the education of low-income students specifically. And then in New York City, the Fair Student Funding Formula, which is the weighted need funding formula for students, has incorporated poverty as a proxy for academic need for elementary school students. And that was since the early 2000s. So poverty is measured for subsidizing meals and also for educational support. And poverty is identified using the federal poverty line across the United States, not just in New York. And it's a measure of cost at the national level that is adjusted for inflation. But this measure hasn't been adjusted for changes in consumption patterns since it was created decades ago. Mainly when the cost of food represented 1/3 of the family's income. So it's drawn criticism for that reason, and it's also been criticized for not capturing the cost of living in a local sense. So in 2022, New York City voters passed a referendum for the city to measure economic need beyond acute poverty, beyond the federal poverty line. And the purpose of that referendum was for the city to start distributing. I'll go over the slide, just don't worry about it. The purpose, there's just a lot of explanation in this. But the purpose of this referendum was to distribute services to families whose income may not fall below the federal poverty threshold, but is still insufficient to cover expenses in a region like New York City, where you need a lot of money to survive, and not just survive, but thrive. We all know that. The problem is government assistance programs are mostly federally funded. So the city can't just unilaterally change eligibility for those programs. Many of them are state administered, federally funded, but some agencies like the Department of Education can choose to incorporate various poverty measures or measures of economic need to support students, and they have been doing that. So in 2024, the Cost of Living Coalition, which is comprised of various organizations, created a county-specific threshold of economic security called the True Cost of Economic Security, or the TCES, and it covers the whole country. And it's not intended to measure poverty, but rather the resources, cash and non-cash, that are needed to thrive in the local economy. So on the map on the right, those are the thresholds for each borough, with Manhattan at the high end at $187,000 post-tax. So that's like an estimate of the resources that the average family would need to thrive in Manhattan. It's very high, but again, it's not a poverty threshold. It's a threshold of thriving. So, but compare that to the federal poverty line of $30,000 for a family of four. It's roughly 6 times as high. IBO adapted this threshold. We didn't replicate what the coalition did. We adapted this measure, so it's an important caveat. We applied it to public school students' census tracts of residence, so not students' own underlying household income, but the median income of families in the census tracts where they reside. We found that citywide, 87%, overwhelming majority of public school students live in a neighborhood below the TCES threshold in their borough. That's when looking at the TCES as a binary. And so it's not surprising that almost all students live in a neighborhood below the threshold in their borough, because the cost of living is so high, and the TCES is accounting for pretty much every expense that a family would need to cover in order to thrive. Compare that to the share of students who live in poverty based on the federal poverty line, 72%. So one note is IBO doesn't collect any data on students' own personal income. So this report is not an apples to apples comparison of student level poverty for the FPL to student level economic security per the TCES by neighborhood. But we did apply this measure to students' neighborhoods. There is a lot of value in looking at neighborhood socioeconomic conditions, because they tend to significantly impact academic outcomes. So the DOE, if they adapted a measure like this, they could potentially provide support to a broader range of students, whether that was at the student level or at the school level, which is how they tend to distribute resources. So then in terms of findings, IBO looked at the share of students whose neighborhoods fall within each quartile range of income below or above the TCES, and we chose to look at it this way to account for the variation in income, especially because this threshold is, relatively speaking, very high. And we found that 93% of students in Manhattan and 90% of students in the Bronx live in neighborhoods where the median income is below the threshold in their borough. And then we looked at the variation within the quartile ranges below the TCES. So that's everybody in blue. And that's the idea of like trying to keep your head above water. And then on the right, you have the share of neighborhoods that fall, students who live in neighborhoods that are quote unquote the green, that live at or above the threshold in their borough. And the Department of Education, since we've shared this report, has signaled interest in exploring the measure. And so, yeah, we're not sure how they'll use it, and we certainly won't be telling them how to use it or recommending any policy changes for their department. But we're excited that they're going to consider incorporating it in some way. Through the presentation slides or
Here, if you could do that.
oh, I can
Oh,
I can do
Yeah, because it's just really
If
quick.
someone wants to talk through what's.
Oh, so just, this is just, an example of the infographics I was talking about. So it's gonna, go over some of the bigger takeaways that, Steph was talking about. So, I guess next slide. Yeah, so here we just presented what the federal poverty level is, and that's what the Department of Education uses. Next slide. And then going through the basic structure of each one. So this is just like to put in the context of like, this is where you would be more, this is for someone who's really going to read through sort of this particular topic, scrolling on Instagram is where I would be seeing this and doing this kind of consuming. And you'll, next slide.
Debt service, where, yeah.
Here we have presentation of the New York City families neighborhoods and the percentage that are in the true cost of economic security threshold. Next slide is probably the last takeaway we have.
And that's the graph on the city's families. So you can see there's a larger percentage of the city's families that live in the green neighborhoods, the neighborhoods that are at or above the threshold. But then in the next slide, when you look at the students, the bar chart is largely blue, meaning most of them are living below the threshold. But the variations within the blue bars are important because we don't want people to see the chart and think, oh, look, like all these people live in poverty. No, they're living below the TCES, which is a measure.
Carol wants to jump in. Carol, you had comments, questions?
I mean, it's, you're not really saying that we should adopt these thresholds. I mean, $187,000. It's just, it's not realistic.
Yes, we agree. And the DOE would go bankrupt if they adopted something like that. I think we all know that. The DOE just can't distribute services, extra funds to everybody and beyond what it's doing. But it's important to understand that the federal poverty line is measuring acute poverty. It's so low. And so I think IBO's perspective is that this measure is an improvement on measuring acute poverty or looking at acute poverty as the only dimension of need. And that the idea that maybe you live $1 above the poverty line. So are you then not in poverty? I mean, no. So I think that's the point.
Yeah, and I think I want to accentuate what Steph said, which is that, I think it's important to think about this not as a binary, like below or above, but rather that's why she took a look at the 25% of the threshold, 50%. So I know you mentioned like you could look at this at the school level. So something that, for example, the Fair Student Funding Formula has done is looked at the concentration of particular students in need at a school. And so that's a way that this could be applied, right? Like, so if you have a concentration of some percentage of students that are at 25% of that come from neighborhoods that are at 25%, you could do something like that.
Just to clarify, what the Urban Institute did basically is a measure of economic security.
Right.
And you can call it Thrive, whatever you want. but
Yeah.
It's really a measure of economic security.
Correct, yes.
And the city used to do, Louise, you and I talked about this, the economic opportunity through for at least 20 years. It certainly up to 2021 did different poverty.
Yes.
Right, and we have used
Which appears
that.
to have disappeared under the current administration.
Yes, it has not been updated. But that is something that IBO started using back in 2015, actually. Steph did that as well, actually. And so this sort of builds upon that application that we had developed in 2015.
Right. So I think that, as Dean said, that, the limitations to the federal poverty levels are not new. And so the city developed, and then the feds adopted an alternate poverty measure. The other part, I think, of this analysis that's important to remember is that Steph is using the Urban Institute, sponsored through this national coalition's creation, and part of it is proprietary, so we don't have all of their understanding, which may lead to increased estimates, although we think they're compensated for. But the charter mandates the city to have a true cost of economic security. And as far as we know, the city has registered a contract with the Urban Institute, but that's all we know. If Jennifer were in the room, perhaps she might know more, although I think that at this point they're pretty closed about what they're doing. But the voters of the city voted in some level of this type of analysis occurring around the type of area, for example, Department of Education and resource allocation. So it's an interesting beginning of thinking, how might this be used and what could it, in fact, shift in terms of at least understanding of communities.
Anyone else? All right, thank you. Well done.
Yeah, I wonder about the purpose of something that is as outside of reality as this appears. And, how is it useful, as a matter of fact? I mean, what?
So Jennifer is joining us.
Good morning. I don't know what time of day it is. I feel I've been up since 5 o'clock, so I don't really have a sense of what time of day it is. I'm sorry that I can't be with you all this morning. I'm glad you're here though. And good to see everyone. And whenever, however you need space, we've got space for our gatherings. So our board meetings and more, whenever you need space. I've got my own board meeting going on, and we're in our annual board meeting right now, so I have to hop back. But I just wanted to stop by and say hello, welcome you to FPWA. Also to thank the IBO for its most recent report, looking at the true cost of economic security and what it tells us about our communities, our children, our schools, and how our children are faring, and how we should be thinking about policy and resources and budget allocations to make sure that they are best supported. It is the very thing that when I say we, the Racial Justice Commission intended, desired, when we put on the ballot a measure for New York City to calculate the annual cost of living. We thought it was important because, as the IBO report helps us to appreciate, the poverty measures don't tell the full story. And in not telling the full story, they actually mask, continuing, perpetuating, frankly, generational, perennial economic insecurity that doesn't allow people to get ahead. Doesn't tell the story of how children are showing up and how their family's financial circumstances can actually impede their ability to be engaged and to learn. It's the very thing what IBO has done is the very thing that we intended when we put that measure on the ballot. So I thank you for doing it, for leading in this space, and we're just gonna keep doing more of it. So I gotta get back. Forgive me, Chair, and I'll be at the next one. Sorry. But they pay my bills.
Right.
See you all.
Thank you, Jen.
Take care.
So she answered.
Yes. Yeah, I think you have to see it as just another, particularly when you read the ordinance report, although you did a great job, so really. It's just another factor that you look and economic security. There are other things, right? There's an MIT measure. I mean, there are other measures out there that are, I mean, we all agree the federal poverty level is too low. Your concern is this is too high, but they're just, it's just another factor to say, okay, this is another way to look at it. And what's the problem?
Well, I haven't read I just think it needs that context. There's an implication here.
I see.
And now it's just the presentation again, so I have to go and read what you wrote, but it needs all of this context framed around it. That, people are concerned that the poverty level is not appropriate, and how do we adjust it? One approach that has been taken is the urban incentive, and then you can go and explain it, but you're not endorsing it be used for school funding or anything. You're just showing how wide the disparity is between the federal poverty measure and a measure that's more realistic portrayal of living expenses. So it doesn't look like you're basically saying, let's use this instead. And that's fine. That's right.
It's really a thought experiment.
Yeah, it's just part of a discussion to prompt more effort into coming up with an appropriate measure for New York. Is that right? Right. Okay, maybe that's in the report. Just wasn't in your.
I was just gonna say, it might be interesting to overlay this with the discussion about class size mandates, because when we get to the idea of the boroughs having such differences in the fact that they are able to meet the needs in terms of economic security, then, because we saw the perverse outcome of the class size mandates, that in some cases, schools that really were more well-funded would end up having more teachers assigned, that this might be another way to intersect those two things, to think about where is the real need for class size differences.
Yeah, like
Well, as Sarita said, as part of the review of every report, we also send the report to the agency whose data we are using. So Department of Education reviewed this report and said that they would like to discuss with us implications of what this might mean once it's published, which is intriguing to us because we also would wonder where they might be thinking of it. But our objective is to move the policy conversation forward. And so to have the owning agency say, let's see what this might mean, is definitely a sign of success. So, it may be that they think, well, we'll let you know after the conversation happens, but the invitation is intriguing.
Yeah, I think the other piece of this, which we've been mentioning, is like there was a constitutional change as part of a referendum passed in 2022. So I think if you have like a legal change, then it's there is on some level a responsibility of the city at some point to evaluate that change and to consider how they might implement a new measure. And this measure is not perfect by any means. No measure is. And if there's a tautology, if you raise a threshold, more people will live beneath it. And I think we understand that. So that was the purpose of this. It was to take a measure, it was to adapt it, and to see what would the data look like if we crunch the numbers. And then agencies that have the latitude to change measures of economic need can then consider it. But in no way are we saying, take this measure, apply it, we'll give you the recommendations and the money. And the money. Yeah. So thanks.
Okay.
Anyone else? Good conversation. Thank you. Really good. What's left? I think upcoming meetings.
Oh, we have, the Federal Reserve, Wagner, and the Independent Budget Office have a speaking series throughout the year, which we know you've been invited to. Our year-end luncheon is on June 18th, midday at the Federal Reserve. We believe you've all been invited, and we very much encourage you to consider attending. The speaker this year is the New York City Housing Authority Board Chair, Jamie Rubin. And we think that particularly given that both the transformation NYCHA is in the process of attempting to complete, as well as the reality that they are 75% federally funded and that many of their funding streams are intensely threatened, this could be a very intriguing conversation. And so if you don't have the invitation in your inbox and wish to attend, please do email either me or Joy Deep, and we welcome your presence. And I think the other piece of information on the slide are the last two meetings of this calendar year, one in September and one in December, with associated Zoom links and also a location to be determined. We continue to eagerly embrace the concept of moving. As you know, 110 William is now moving towards ACS being the anchor tenant. They are moving in. DCAS is fiercely negotiating on our behalf. And our lease, I don't even think the word inch is appropriate. Millimeters towards completion. We have 4 outstanding clauses. But once that lease is completed, we believe that we will be able to move in a couple months. So hopefully, at least our December meeting will be in our new space, which is also downtown. But that's why it's TBD. And on September meeting, who knows what will be? Maybe back at FPWA or some other location.
Great. Any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you all.